We begin my top 24 remaining tight end rankings. Please keep in mind that Thursday night players are not included in these. With tight ends that I think are probably back in tight end twos, we have Lucas Kroll, Dalton Schultz, and Zach Ertz. Kroll has received 4 targets in each of the past 2 games. It's a plus matchup against the Panthers, and so I do think he starts to assert himself in this offense. He's played better than Troutman, and so I do think that he is going to see an uptick in production. It's just how much is he going to receive? But I do think that he's on the rise. Dalton Schultz is playing the Indianapolis Colts this week. He, after 2 weeks of very solid production, was basically a non-factor this past week, but to be fair, basically nobody was a factor. I don't think he has the best game in this one. I think that Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs are going to go off, as well as Joe Mixon. But I still think that he's a fine tight end too. I just don't think he's going to see a massive amount of volume. And at 22, we have Zach Ertz against the Chicago Bears. First of all, it isn't the best matchup, but also I don't think that Jaden Daniels plays. And so for that reason, with Marcus Mariota playing against the Bears, I really don't like the passing offense. I think they'll be able to run the ball at least more effectively than they'll be able to pass it. And so really pass catchers in this game, unless you just really don't have better options, I would probably just avoid altogether. Tight ends that I think are probably mid to back end tight end twos this week are Isaiah Likely, Theo Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, Sam Laporta, and Jonnu Smith. Isaiah Likely has received either 3 or 4 targets in each of the past 3 weeks, and 3 weeks ago he had 2 receiving touchdowns. I think he is going to be a little bit more efficient with his targets in this one. I just don't think he has a massive day. Theo Johnson, after 2 weeks of, at least compared to what he did in the beginning of the season, substantial production, came back to earth when Malik Neighbors came back and the offense was busy getting sacked for the entirety of the game. I think he has an easier going against Pittsburgh, and I really think towards the back half of this season, but especially next year, he's really going to show substantial growth as a receiver in terms of his involvement. Pat Freiermuth is playing against the Giants. He didn't see hardly any volume last week. It's really hard to project him to have a very good game in a negative matchup when he's really not getting the most volume. And so I do think that he's a talented player. It's hard to rank him as one of the better tight ends without the volume. Sam Laporta is playing against the Titans. With JMO being suspended, I do think he sees more than 1 to 2 targets. It's just hard to project him to receive much more than maybe 4 to 5 in JMO's absence. Maybe it happens. I think he's going to be efficient with his targets. Until we see, one of those 6 to 10 target games again, it's really hard to have him ranked anywhere near the elite tight ends, even though he's really talented and in a great offense. And then Jonnu Smith, he went off last week. I do expect him to relatively return to earth. With Tua back, I think the passing assets and the receiving core in terms of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going to have very solid days. And I think that reduces Jonnu Smith's role, but I still think he's going to see some involvement. I would just temper expectations, and I definitely wouldn't expect a repeat of last week. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. All right, so tight ends that I think are probably mid to high-end tight end twos are Noah Fant, Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, and Cole Kmet. Noah Fant has had 63 and 65 receiving yards in each of the past 2 weeks. In a plus matchup against Buffalo, I do project him to have another solid, consistent game. I just don't project a touchdown. And so I do think he's a very safe floor option. I just wouldn't project a ceiling game in this one. Then we have Mark Andrews playing against the Browns. He's had 3 touchdowns in the past 2 games, and he's received more overall usage, which is more important because touchdowns are rather fluky. And so I do think he remains involved in this one. I don't project a touchdown. And so for that reason, I think he's a safe floor option. I just don't think he has a boom game. Dallas Goedert, in the absence of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, went off. However, with them returning, he definitely came back down to earth. The target share just isn't working in his favor with all of the assets they have in the passing game. And so for that reason, I think he's a pretty safe floor option. I just definitely wouldn't project one of those massive boom weeks. And then Cole Kmet has had 2 awesome weeks this season. In some of the other games, he's been fine or just kind of uninvolved. I do think he sees a solid amount of targets this week. I just don't project a touchdown. And so for that reason, I wouldn't project one of those massive boom weeks, but I do think he's a very safe floor option. Tight ends that I think are low-end tight end ones to potentially mid-tight end ones are Hunter Henry, Travis Kelce, Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid, and Jake Ferguson. Hunter Henry was awesome last week with Drake May. I do like the chemistry that they're showing. It isn't the best matchup. I do want to see a consistent target share before moving him up into potentially mid tight end one territory. But I definitely think he has a ton of upside now. And so we'll definitely have to see how his production ends up looking this week, because if he has another good game, he's definitely going to move up in the rankings. Travis Kelce is playing the Vegas Raiders this week. I do think he scores a touchdown. I just don't think he has a ton of overall production. And so for that reason, I do think he's a pretty good start. I just think there are other tight ends that will have better production this week. Tucker Kraft is playing against the Jaguars this week. It's an awesome matchup for him. I think he is quite involved in this one. I don't project a touchdown, but I think he is a very, very strong start. Dalton Kincaid is playing against the Seahawks this week. He is questionable, but I do think he ends up suiting up. There is the potential for this to be a high-scoring game, and so for that reason, I also think he's a strong start in what is an advantageous matchup. Jake Ferguson is playing against the 49ers this week. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup. I do think, though, coming off a bye week, they are going to have a solid game plan, and I think part of that game plan is going to be getting him involved, and so I think he sees a pretty good target share in this one. With him playing against Fred Warner, I wouldn't bet on a ceiling game, but I do think due to the what should be a solid amount of volume is a pretty strong start. And then we have tight ends that I think are probably going to finish as tight end ones, and I think are realistic candidates to be the tight end one overall. We have Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts, Trey McBride, David Njoku, Cade Otton, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. Evan Ingram, 2 weeks ago, had a ridiculous 10-catch, over 100-yard game. He came back down to earth, but it was really due to the Jaguars, interestingly enough, easily winning a game. And so I do think against Green Bay, they're not going to be blowing out Green Bay by any stretch of the imagination. And so for that reason, I do think he sees an uptick in targets from this past week, but I don't project a 10-catch, 100-yard game for him. But nonetheless, I think he's a very strong start and has a ton of upside in what should be a pass-happy game plan for the Jaguars out of necessity rather than preference. Kyle Pitts is playing against Tampa Bay this week. Personally, if I own any running back, quarterback, tight end, or wide receiver involved in this one, I want to start them without a doubt. I think this should be a very high-scoring game. And in the past matchup, Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 yards. I wouldn't project that again, but Tampa Bay's defense just got annihilated by Lamar Jackson. And so with them being annihilated by Lamar Jackson last week, and also with them doing it themselves a couple weeks ago as well, I think that Pitts and everyone involved in this game is a very solid start. Then we have Trey McBride playing against Miami. I think that he does score a touchdown in this one. I just think his overall production is somewhat limited, but I still think he's a very good start. And I do think, once again, that he gets the ever so elusive Trey McBride touchdown. Then we have David Njoku against Baltimore. It's a great matchup. He's really the wide receiver one now. And so for that reason, I think he's going to be featured each and every week and is a potential top 5 option weekly. But I do want to see consistent production due to the potential for quarterback instability. But I still think this week especially, he's a very, very good start. Just like with Kyle Pitts, if you own Cade Otton, start him with confidence. They have to throw to somebody. There's no way their defense is going to be able to stop Atlanta, at least in my opinion. And so for that reason, I think he sees a ton of volume in this one. Then we have George Kittle against Dallas. He has been awesome each and every single week, at least the ones that he's played. I don't think anything changes against Dallas. I think he's going to be a featured asset in the passing game and is, in my opinion, the second best tight end to own this week. And then we have Brock Bowers. There really isn't much to say. It's a plus matchup. They traded away his only real target competition. And with them being pretty bad, I think he's the best bet basically each and every single week, unless he has a terrible matchup and another one of these elite tight ends has an awesome one. But yeah, I think generally, pretty much every week, he is going to be my tight end one. All right, so to conclude, tight ends that I think are probably low end tight end twos this week are Lucas Kroll, Dalton Schultz, and Zach Ertz. Tight ends that I think are probably mid to low end tight end twos, but do have upside if they happen to score a touchdown, are Isaiah Likely, Theo Johnson, Pat Fryermuth, Sam Laporta, and Jonnu Smith. Tight ends that I think are probably mid to high end tight end twos that do have a substantial amount of upside if they do score touchdowns are Noah Fant, Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, and Cole Kmet. Tight ends that I think are probably mid to low end tight end ones this week are Hunter Henry, Travis Kelce, Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid, and Jake Ferguson. And then tight ends that I think are top shelf tight end ones that have the potential to be the tight end one overall this week are Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts, Trey McBride, David Njoku, Cade Otton, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. All right, so remember, Thursday night game players are not included in these rankings, so if you see somebody from that game missing, that's why. But yeah, who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Is there somebody that I'm missing entirely from these rankings that I projected to score too few points? Please let me know below in the comment section, and if you could, let me know why. With that being said, if you like what you've seen and heard, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.